This is a tool that I'm working on for the GPA Junkyard to help remove valves from Coleman lanterns. So when you have an old Coleman lantern like this and the valve is sticky, it's not working well, it needs to be removed in order to be clean. And here you can see the valve down in there. It's got a slot across it, and this is what these teeth here engage with. We already spent a good bit of time in testing on designing these teeth profiles and found that this worked best, and it had to be hardened in order to not bend in operation. The first thing you have to do is take this screw and feed it down in there and screw that into the valve. There's two different sizes. This is one of the larger sizes. Remove the wing nut. Now you can take your tool and go down in there, and then it seats into the valve. You'll feel it drop in. There you go. One thing I forgot to show, because I don't have it here at the moment, is we do have a plastic bushing piece that fits on here and is held in place with an O-ring, such that when it goes into here, it keeps it from being wiggled around when you're wrenching on it, so it keeps everything centered. Just remember that there's this plastic bushing that's missing there. So right here, it seats in the valve, and you'll see it drop in. Boom. Okay, then you take your wing nut and attach it to the end. Then you use an open wrench to undo the valve. So there we go. We're able to take the valve out without doing any damage to it. And once the valve is cleaned up and the ball is working and everything, then we can go ahead and take it, put it back inside, and we're going to screw it back in and tighten it. Then the wing nut gets removed, this tool gets removed, and then the screw is removed. So I want to document this design process that we went through to get here, which is kind of interesting, because the first thing we did is we wanted to use these coupling nuts to provide the surface to grab onto with the wrench. And the best way to do that was to use a reverse thread on the body and a reverse left-handed threaded coupling nut, such that when you are loosening the valve, which is when the most force is required, you're actually tightening this joint, because the valve has a regular thread, so you're loosening, you're turning it counterclockwise, you're tightening this thread. So you don't need to worry about that. And we thought maybe we could just use some Loctite, such that when you're tightening the valve back in there, that this wouldn't come apart, and also that the tension from the inner shaft would keep everything together. That was not necessarily the case, so then we decided we needed to weld this on there. So I'm using a TIG welder here, and the first welds I did were to come in and try to just do some spot welds at the corners of this nut between the shaft and the nut, and make like just a little tiny fillet in there. But that ended up filling up quite a bit, even if I didn't use any filler rod. So I tried to do three, one here, skip one here, skip one, do one here. This was the result of that. And I was not really pleased with the appearance. It ended up melting a lot of the edge. Here I was using about 100 amps maximum current on the TIG welder, and it was really melting a lot. Maybe I was overdoing it a little bit. Maybe I didn't need to do it that much. And these welds also interfere with the area where the plastic bushing is. The plastic bushing is not as long. There's some space to move, but really didn't really like how this turned out. One thing I want to point out is I'm not a great welder. I just weld occasionally with the TIG welder, so don't have a lot of experience. This one I tried to do, I started off with 3 points, and then I tried to fill it in. So I didn't do like a continuous around. That's why there's these kind of stopping points here. And it would have looked better if I just gone continuously around. But in the end, it really didn't work anyways, because it created this, here I used some filler rod, and it just created too little space for the bushing here. The fillet went up the shaft too much. So this didn't turn out very good either. Then what we noticed is that inside here, we had blocked some of the passageway, and you see this one's still blocked because I broke a drill bit in there trying to drill out some of the welding drips that had fallen in through the passageway. So I was actually penetrating much deeper than I thought, and we couldn't put the rod through anymore without drilling it out to clean it out. That was not ideal either, because then there's another step to do in the making of these. But the fact that the weld had penetrated that deeply gave me an idea. What if we just focus the energy of the weld in a single spot on the surface of the nut and penetrate all the way through the nut into the shaft and weld those two together? And this worked wonderfully. So here I show you we have on one side, I just focused the weld energy there from the TIG welder, just held it in place over top of it at 100 amps until it made a nice pool and you can see that it had enough penetration. And then the only thing is, if I released very slowly, if I released the current pedal very slowly, I would get this slow movement of heat back to the center and then a little mountain, a little volcano in the center. That happened on both sides here. But if I release the heat very quickly with the foot pedal, then it kind of made a smoother surface, just a little tiny hill. So that's looks better and is easier to clean up afterwards too. So this part is fully welded onto the shaft. It is impossible to break these two pieces apart. And the nice thing is that it didn't penetrate all the way to the inside diameter. So we don't have to clean out the inside diameter. It will be interesting to do a test where we cut a cross section through here and we can look at how deep the weld is penetrated and how good the weld is. One thing I noticed is to not let this cool before you do the other side. Just go ahead, weld this spot, then flip it around as quickly as possible and weld the other spot while everything is still hot so that it keeps the nut in line and keeps anything from warping. Even better would be to build a fixture which holds on to this and keeps everything straight. The other idea that we were thinking about to fabricate this is to make the threads long enough so they run all the way to the top here, weld the inner tube to the nut around the top here, and then shave that off on the lathe to have a nice finish. Now the downside of that is we need more material here to make it longer, and you would be surprised, but every little thing adds to the cost of it, and it's not really necessary to have it run all the way through the top. And the other thing is the thread needs to be cut all the way to the top, which is more time on the lathe and more wear of the tool. And so it's not ideal to have to just kind of waste material where you don't need it. So therefore, this solution of doing the spot weld that penetrates through into the tube is superior to trying to make the tube longer to come to the top and weld at the top. Also, since we're now able to make a clean weld on this nut, we can change the nut to a much more common right-hand threaded nut instead of the left-hand threaded nut because the weld is sufficiently strong to hold the nut in place. You're going to break the valve or something long before you're going to break this weld. So we could go to a right-hand thread, which is a lot less expensive nut and would save money and save on the overall cost of this. And so we can offer this at a less expensive price to the customer if we're using a right-hand threaded coupling nut. As with a lot of engineering, machining, and fabrication, this was the learning experience. And if you have any other ideas of how to do this better, then I'm fully open to hearing them. So leave a comment down below if you have a better idea of how we can permanently attach this coupling nut to this tube.